like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual works of love. Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual works of love.
Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual works of love. Be ours a religion which like sunshine grows everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, a good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual works of love.
Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual works of love.
Be ours a religion which like sunshine grows everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual works of love. Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual works of love.
Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere.
Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual works of love. Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love. Be ours a religion which like sunshine grows everywhere, its temple all space, its shrine a good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love.
Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere, its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love.
Be ours a religion which like sunshine grows everywhere, its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love. Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere, its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love.
Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere, its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love. Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere, its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love.
Greetings and welcome to Mount Vernon Unitarian Church. I'm the Reverend Christian Schmidt, interim minister of this congregation. Whether this is your first time with us or your 1001st, know that you are welcome here and that we're so glad to have you. Safety issues prevent us from gathering together in person right now, but we're glad we can provide this forum to find comfort and recommit ourselves to the mission of supporting one another in our spiritual journeys, working for justice, caring for the earth, and building the common good. We gather to recommit ourselves to dismantling systems of oppression and injustice. It is good to be together. I have two announcements that I also included in a pastoral note I sent by email a few days ago. They are both very exciting in their own way. The first is that on October 10th at 4 p.m., we're going to gather outside on the terrace for a short worship service and then a time to be together. will be masked and socially distanced, so it's a safe opportunity to see people in person. Just after that, on October 12th, the parking lot project will begin. We're going to repave the entire parking lot, which, as many of you know, is in shape that needs to be repaired. This will take about 2 weeks, and pretty much all church events on site will not be happening at that point. We will still continue our online offerings. We'll be doing many things, so look for that in email and on our website. For the service today, we ask you to turn off your cameras and Zoom so that it's easier to focus on the service. Afterwards, we'll invite you to turn on your camera so that you can see each other and give a virtual hug and wave. There'll also be an opportunity for you to participate today. If you have a chalice at home, we would love for you to get that out quick and light the chalice with us today. Today's service is about history. The history of Unitarian Universalism, and of this congregation, and of each of us, and most importantly, why that matters to us today. I invite you now to take a deep breath and as we enter into this time of worship. If you have your home chalices ready, now is the time to get ready to light them. These words are from Audette Fulbright Fulson, called "We Inherit This Free Faith from the Brave and Gentle." So strike your matches as we hear these words. This light we kindle is set in the lamp of our history. We inherit this free faith from the brave and gentle, fierce and outspoken, hearts and minds that have come before us. Let us be worthy inheritors of this faith, and through our good works, pass it boldly to a new generation.
Would you turn in your gray hymnals to number 145, As Tranquil Streams? Words may also be found in your orders of service and on your screen. I'll play through this once for us. As tranquil streams that meet and merge and flow as one to seek the sea, our kindred hearts and minds unite to build a church that shall be free, free from the bonds that bind the mind to narrow thought and lifeless creed, free from a social code that fails to serve the cause of human need, a freedom that reveres the past but trusts the dawning future more, and bids the soul in search of truth and ventures boldly and explore. Prophetic church of future waits your liberating ministry. Go forward in the power of love, proclaim the truth that makes us free.
Let us join our voices in the covenant found on the screen and in your heart.
Love is the teaching of this church.
The quest of truth is its daily task, and service is its prayer.
To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom.
To serve life in community, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony.
This is our covenant with each and with all.
I imagine some of us know a lot about the history of Mount Vernon Unitarian Church, but some may know very little. To give a brief synopsis, it was founded in the 50s by a group of enterprising individuals in this area who wanted a Unitarian church of their very own. The minister of All Souls DC, A. Pal Davies, had been doing an ambitious growth program of his own, founding many churches in the greater DC area. And so this group ultimately worked with the UUA establishment and with Minister Davies, Reverend Davies, to found what is now known as Mount Vernon Unitarian Church. This video gives you a little bit of the history, and it's really amazing to watch. So I encourage you to watch this and learn a little bit about the history of our church.
But very soon, surprising things began to happen in the Mount Vernon, Virginia area. Although the Greater Washington Committee was ready to take a breather, it hadn't counted on one Joe Remington of 1311 Popkins Lane. He hadn't ever been in a Unitarian church. Joe and his family enjoyed reading the Sunday morning papers. But he and his wife kept thinking that maybe they should be sending the kids to Sunday school. One Sunday morning, Joe decided to go over and talk with his neighbors, the Howards. They were pretty sensible people. Maybe they'd found a good church to go to. Maybe it might be a good place for the Remingtons. At least it might be good for the children. But Gordon Howard was not a particularly happy churchgoer that morning. For a number of reasons, he just couldn't accept some of the things they were teaching his children in church school. What's the use of filling their minds with ideas which were just not true, and which they would soon have to unlearn? The type of leaflets they distributed were disturbing to him. As Mr. Howard was going on in this vein, over came the Johnsons from the next house down Popkins Lane. The Johnsons were not thrilled with material of this nature either. They didn't want it for their kids. But Mr. Howard had one more pamphlet to show, something about Unitarianism. Well, to make a long story short, the three families decided right then and there that there should be a Unitarian church set up to serve the folks on Popkins Lane and others living near the Parkway from Alexandria to Mount Vernon. So they ran a little ad in the local community paper, just to test out the sentiment. They had not even consulted the Washington Church or the Greater Washington Committee. It was really a case of spontaneous generation. When Joe Remington came home from work a few days later, his friends had a copy of the paper to show him, and though they had high hopes, none of them was prepared for what happened. The little ad brought responses far beyond their wildest expectations. The telephones on Popkins Lane really got a workout. In no time at all, Joe Remington and his friends had assembled a congregation. They came clamoring to the Greater Washington Committee for recognition and support for the new Mount Vernon Unitarian Center. A pleasant little chapel was available, and in the fall of 1955, this sixth Unitarian congregation in the Greater Washington area began to hold services, piped in from nearly 15 miles away at All Souls.
Mount Vernon Unitarian Church continues to share our plate with committed organizations that you, our members, have chosen. This week, our offering is being shared with the Minister's Discretionary Fund here in the congregation. That fund supports our members and friends in need with small financial gifts. It's one of the many ways that we give to support one another. We are a community that invites spiritual and material generosity from our members. I give to Mount Vernon Unitarian Church because it's important for me to support this congregation and make sure that it's strong for many years to come. So I invite the gathered community to offer whatever you are comfortable with in spirit and financial generosity for the mission of our church community. If you'd like to write and mail a check for the offering, please make it out to MVUC, and in the memo line indicate if it's for the general fund or for fulfill your pledge or for another purpose. You can also follow the link in the chat box to make a one-time or recurring payment through our website. We are so grateful for your donation.
earth together, it's you and I. God has made us fall in love, it's true. I've really found someone like you. Will it stay? The love you give to me, will you say that you will be by my side to see me through until my life is through? In my mind, we can conquer the world in love, you and I, you and I, you and I. I am glad, at least in my life I found someone that may not be here forever to see me through, but I found my strength in you. 'Cause in my mind you will stay here always in love, you and I, you and I, you and I.
Please join me in a time of silence followed by our prayer and reflection today. So take a moment to get yourself ready, get all those last wiggles out, take a deep breath in and out, and join me in silence. Our reflection today is written by Marjorie Bowens-Wheatley and Clyde Grubbs. It's called History's Road. The road of history is long, full of both hope and disappointment. In times past, there have been wars and rumors of wars, violence and exploitation, hunger and homelessness, and destruction of this earth, your creation. We have become a global village with a growing realization of how fragile this earth is, how interconnected we are to each other and to all creation. We cannot continue to live in the old way. We must make a change, see a new way, a way towards peace with justice and a healthy planet. O great creative spirit, you have given us a vision of the good, and we yearn for a new way, but where are we to find the courage to begin this work? We know that a different tomorrow is possible, but how can we build it? We think of the prophets, women and men who voiced unpopular opinions, who made personal sacrifices, sometimes lost their lives for the sake of justice. We think of Isaiah, who called out to let those who are held in captivity go free, to give solace to the poor and homeless. Let us be inspired by all who work to overcome misery, poverty, and exploitation. We think of Harriet Tubman, who grew up not so far from here, called out to people of goodwill to join her on an underground railroad, to lift a dehumanized people from the bondage of slavery to the promise of freedom, even when it meant challenging unjust laws. Let us be inspired by those who are outlaws for freedom. We think of Gandhi, whose belief in soul force, the witness to love's truth, helped to overthrow the oppression of an empire and gave witness to the way of nonviolent action. Let us be inspired to become witnesses for peace. We think of Chief Seattle, who reminded us that we belong to the earth, not the earth to us. Let us be inspired by all those who work for the healing of creation, of Mother Earth and all her creatures. Who are the prophets who inspire you? They may be well known or known only to you, offering personal inspiration, courage, and hope. May they join a great cloud of witnesses to a new way of life, the way of peace and justice, the way of justice lived according to the way of peace, the beloved community. So may it be.
I am a Unitarian. I've got my badge right here. I am a Universalist. Every day, every week of the year, I'll do what's right. I'll face the foe and fight my actions. Everyone will know that I am a Unitarian. I've got my badge right here. I am a Universalist. Every day, every week of the year, I will try to do what's right. I'll try to face the night like the light, shining brightly through the darkness so they know everywhere I go that I stand for truth and justice, compassion and liberty. I am a Unitarian. I've got my badge right here. I am a Universalist. Every day, every week of the year. Mama!
Today's reading is by Sean Neil Barron. He writes, "One day your church was born. Maybe it was a gathering of saints called together for the common worship of a wrathful God, ceaselessly praying between bouts of decrying the evil of Christmas or dancing. Or maybe a few brave souls answered a notice in the newspaper. curiosity piqued by the announcement of a religion where free thinking and tolerance were bedrocks. No matter how it happened, your church was born, a gathering of people, humble and caring, anxious, all at the same time, who covenanted to be with one another on the journey of life, death, and everything in between. And so it began, a faithful few. Beautifully imperfect, called to that central task, that human task of connecting, loving, and serving. It was just a baby, but it was thrust deep into the human condition. Tasked to hold minds and souls, bodies and hearts along the roller derby of disease and birth, infighting and joy, and Christmas pageants, too. Sometimes all at the same time. They gathered to hear the world broken open, for insightful sermons, rejuvenating music, a community whose fierce devotion to each other's well-being rivaled a mama bear's for its cubs. But it wasn't always like that, of course. There were trying times, and I don't just mean Phyllis or Jack, those stubborn but lovable souls who inhabit the netherworld of committee meetings. No, I mean the trying times, when the church almost split in half over the war or integration, or when the mill left the town vacant, or when the minister crossed that line and people couldn't speak about it for decades. But somehow you were still here. Still on the town common, still the church that everyone recognized, still the ones that show up every time you're called on, still using the communion silver until you voted to sell it. New people came and they changed things, small things, big things, things nobody noticed as it happened until suddenly it was hard to even recognize anything anymore. That was a hard moment, a tearful moment. And other things changed too. The proclamations about God, once heard loud from the pulpit, softened. Wrathful became loving. Distant became intimate. Mandatory became optional. After the war, the nursery and RE classrooms were overflowing. Each baby dedicated reminded the church of the incredible beauty of life and the gift of this community, all huddled around baby, would bestow upon this child. The history of your church is more a story of the determination of love to break forth than it is about tie-dye or chalices or sermon discussions or even social justice committee meetings. The history of the church is the history of human enterprise, evolving in its sights and sound, yet revolving always around its core. The history of your church is the gift of potential and momentum, of baggage and personality. The history of your church is the launch pad from which you sprang into action or disarray. Each day, your church is born. Friends, today's sermon can be boiled down to just this, if you needed the too long, didn't read version. It's this. We have a rich history. It has helped shape who we are today, and it can either propel us into the future or weigh us down. That's it. But I have some more to say about that. Because this is true of each of us here as individuals. Each of us comes from parents and relatives and ancestors who led interesting and challenging lives, whether we know much about them or not. Each of us was born in a place and a time that shaped who we are today. Each of us grew up experiencing life and the world in a specific time and place. And now we are each here in this present moment, having come from all the many places we have come, with all the experiences we have had, to this time and place, even if you're watching this recorded later some point on our YouTube channel. We could, of course, fill many books with the details of each of those stories, the particular wheres and whens and hows and whys of our own personal history. But for today, it's enough to know that each of us has that story. Now, this congregation, Mount Vernon Unitarian Church, has a history too. You may have learned or heard it once again in the video earlier a little bit about how the congregation began. How our founders, led by Joe Remington, came together to gather a group in 1955 in the boom time post-war era as the suburbs all over the nation, but certainly here, exploded with growth. Now, I know this story because it's all too familiar. It's a common one for many Unitarian Universalist churches. My home church, the Church of the Brazos Valley in College Station, Texas, was founded just a few months after MVUC, and it has some of the same spirit, if a very different geographical location. Those MVUC founders sought help from UUA headquarters in Boston and then from DC minister A. Powell Davies, who was one of the most successful church growth experts in our entire history. With that help, they began the process to make what we now know as Mount Vernon Unitarian Church. We could go through all of the decades, the first minister, the Reverend Ernest Sommerfeld in 1957, or buying the property where the church now exists. We could talk about the mid-'80s when expansion was needed, and so the chapel and office and commons areas were built. Or a couple decades later, when the commons was rebuilt and expanded. We could talk about the stained glass window designed and created by church member Jane Koffler. And of course, a million other details and events, births and deaths, marriages, coffee houses, concerts, worships, meetings, so much more. Now, given that I have a total of 8 weeks of history with Mount Vernon Unitarian Church, I won't presume to be an expert on that history. For that, I would advise you to start with our website, which has a lovely brief history of the congregation, and then perhaps seek out some of our resident experts. All of us, for that history and for a much longer compiled version of the history, owe a debt of gratitude to Lucy Walsh Finney, who compiled wonderful histories of the church and this property in 1994. But even as little as I thus far know about this history, I know this. It is a rich and powerful legacy for us to build on, but not something we should let hold us back. Because things will change. Things have already changed many times. And it's maintaining our core values while allowing for growth and transformation that is the difficult but vital work of church. It's part of why I want us all together to engage MVUC's history and the history of the place upon which our campus is now. Because this land was once the home of Native Americans, the Piscataways and others. And this land, right here where I'm sitting now, was shaped and cultivated by enslaved peoples of African descent. This land has passed through many hands into now our care. And it's important that we know and honor that history, the glorious parts, but also the shameful parts. It's part of why I want us to publicly acknowledge that history, perhaps with a display in our commons. Now, fortunately, we are people who have always believed in growth and in learning new things and new ways of being, so I know we can do this. We're also not alone. Others are engaging this work. Others are engaging the work of history and the work of church and the work of Unitarian Universalism. Because we come from a tradition that we are but a part of. There are more than 1,000 Unitarian Universalist churches that are part of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and there are hundreds more that are part of our Canadian or British and Hungarian and various country organizations in Central and South America, Africa, Asia, and Oceania. All told, there are hundreds of thousands of Unitarian Universalists and Unitarians around the world, connected through the bonds of relationship and covenant. We didn't start yesterday or even in 1961 when the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America, after many years of talks, consolidated to form the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association. We come from people who are used to change, after all. We come from people who have often been called heretics for their unorthodox beliefs. Unitarian Universalists and Unitarians and Universalists before that have been at the forefront of many movements for change, for the abolition of slavery. We have been creators of social welfare programs. We have been political leaders. There are 4 U.S. presidents that have been Unitarians, and a 5th, Thomas Jefferson, was a big fan, if not a Unitarian himself. We have been proponents of social justice. We have been leaders in the civil rights movement and in the marriage equality movement and in so many other important causes too. Which is not to say we have been perfect. For all those Unitarians who pushed to abolish slavery, there were also those who supported it to their dying breath. Notably, John Calhoun, the U.S. Vice President, ardent supporter of slavery, and one of the founders of All Souls Unitarian in Washington, D.C. Unitarians, too, were leaders in the eugenics movement. Now, I say this just to make sure that we don't get too cocky, that we know our own history is far from perfect, and to remind us to be cautious and careful even about the stances we take today. We have to be bold, but we should also be aware that we might be wrong, and that we have to learn and try to correct our mistakes. But so it always is. There are things in each of our lives that we're proud of and moments we would prefer to forget. We're human and complex and beautiful and messy. And so are our communities. So is our world. We have rich histories as individuals, as a congregation, as a faith. There are things in them to be proud of and moments we wish had gone differently that we would like to learn from. We have so much to celebrate, so much to reflect upon. And as the world around us changes, we have our own adaptation to do. But we've done it before. 20 months ago, none of us expected we would become experts at virtual church, but here we are as we slowly begin to come together in person again. We'll learn new things once again. Our history has brought us to this point. How exciting is it to think about where we might go next?
Would you please join us in singing from your teal hymnals, number 1017, Building a New Way, all the verses. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, the world would die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
Will you join me as we unite our voices to recite the words to extinguish our chalice, words known within our hearts and can be found displayed upon your screen? We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Friends, we have a proud and rich history, and one that we can learn from. This congregation has huge potential, and much of it is coming into shape as we prepare for a new era of ministry, with a new parking lot, yes. We will bring our history, and it will support us as we boldly move into the future. I'm excited to be your interim minister, and I hope you're excited to be a part of this community.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide. And so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. We are answering the call